faster than a fraudulent performance measure, stronger than a misplaced decimal point, able to leap complex compliance requirements at a single bound. It's Super Auditor! Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to Auditors Save the World, one audit project at a time, where we bring you thrilling tales of daring audits and brave financial reviews. Here, our heroes don't wear capes, but they do wield the power of empirical evidence. Brought to you by the pros at Yellowbook-CPE. In each episode, we interview those legendary auditors who have truly rescued the day. Stay tuned, listeners, because this is one story you won't want to miss. And folks, don't forget to subscribe to our show in your podcast app of choice. And now, here's your host, Lita Hart-Fanta.
In the bustling streets of Portland, Oregon, where city halls echo with the clamor of politics and paper trails twist like a labyrinth, one hero shines a light through the darkness. Mary, the elected city auditor, tireless, unflinching, and with a heart as mighty as her pen, she wields the power of the community to create real change. When faced with resistance and wounded pride from those she audited, Mary never faltered. For she knew her mission was not to placate egos, but to serve and uplift the public, especially those most in need. Her battle? To ensure the city honored and protected the health and safety of the disabled. Her weapon? A steadfast determination to see justice done. Through compassion, grit, and the relentless courage to hold power accountable, Mary convinced city leaders to act on her recommendations, saving lives and transforming her community. We bring you her story of hope, heroism, and true public service.
Okay, so when we all left our offices in March of 2020, we decided we were going to go back and revisit our audit schedule because some of the things on our list just suddenly weren't as important anymore. Considering that the workplace had been atomized all over the place. And one of the things that I was very interested to know was about the way people were using city credit cards.
Oh.
Since everybody was all over the place, and the old and the falls would be in a very different place. And the other thing was, in Portland, all we talk about is this big earthquake that's going to come, and it's going to destroy us all and kill us all and liquefy our ground. And I find that conversation very not worthwhile, because if we're all going to die, then why are we spending so much time about what our response to this Cascadia earthquake is going to be?
Okay, are you making that up? Is that real?
No, I am not. I'm telling you, that's
You're
all we
right
talk
on a
about.
fault line and you're going to fall up into the sea? Is that what's going to happen to
Yes.
you?
All our bridges are going to fall down.
Oh, okay.
Parts of Portland are the ground is going to liquefy. Our airport apparently will go down in quicksand.
Oh,
And so it's a real thing that's on the horizon. Nobody knows when it's going to hit, but we're not used to having these kinds of disasters. We don't have tornadoes. We do have tsunami alerts, but only inland. We don't worry about that too much, and so we're not very used to having to talk about natural disasters. So when COVID hits, I think this is the perfect time to go look at our ability to respond to these kinds of emergencies, because buildings are falling down.
Yeah.
People's lives are not in immediate jeopardy from a tree falling on them, or their house caving on them. And the city had formed this emergency communications center, and so there was all this activity. And I thought, let's add that onto our audit schedule and let's start looking at that. And because I had brought the concept of looking at equity-related issues in addition to efficiencies and effectiveness, I thought it was important that we look at the city's ability to respond to when there's vulnerable people in an emergency, and that would be people with disabilities.
Oh, wow.
And so that was the scope of our audit.
Wow.
And we had some indications in other parts of the city. We'd done the city's response to accommodation requests.
Yeah.
And that outcome was not very good. And so we had some indications that this was a potential troublesome area of the city. So we launched the audit, and we go out to start asking questions, and we found some terrific criteria from the Department of Justice that have a toolkit for state and local governments to determine if they're in compliance with the Americans with Disabilities Act. And while that act doesn't specifically mention emergency management, what it essentially says is that any service provided by local government or state government has to be accessible to everybody. And so we thought, let's look at emergency management services.
Yeah.
So we immediately started finding that the conversations around people with disabilities was almost non-existent. And so the
Oh, wow.
people who need the city the most
Yeah.
were not even really part of the conversation. And so they're supposed to be doing planning. They have to know where people with disabilities are. They have to know essentially what their needs are.
Yeah.
And depending on what kind of disaster we're talking about, what kind of help they would need, they need transportation, do they need medical, what do they need? So we didn't know where they were, and we didn't know what they needed. And so the plans that the emergency management people had been doing, well, a good number of them were out of date, or they were incomplete, or they were just non-existent. And what they kept telling us, oh, we just don't have enough people. We don't have enough people to get all this work done. And so an important context for their performance is that Portland was this location form of government, which we just got rid of. We just elected our new people in our new form of government. But what that meant was that the city is run by a committee. It means that the 5 elected council members are responsible for running the administrative oversight of individual departments with the bureaus.
So individual council members are assigned to different departments.
Yes. And they are the boss of that department. And so emergency management was a little bit of a football. It got knocked all over the place. So sometimes the mayor would have it, and then sometimes a different commissioner would have it. And so it was suffering from the structural problems of the commission form of government, and that was not unusual for a lot of departments. And so they told us we don't have enough people to do this. And so I suggested to the audit team that they go look in the budget and see if they have been asking for resources to get this work done and being turned down, because that will influence what kind of recommendations we would give. And they weren't asking for more resources for this kind of work. And so we went back to them and said, this is federal law, right? So you can't say we're not going to do this because we don't have enough resources. And so it ended up that the findings were pretty tough. It was basically a group of people that had not been even thought of by the city. And there was different kinds of outreach to different communities. And they would say, oh, well, there are people with disabilities there, but it wasn't, it's supposed to be specific for them and specific to them. And it's supposed to be tightly coordinated both internal to the city and with other governments. Community groups who advocate for people with disabilities. So our findings across the board were pretty stark, that none of that work that we expected to find was going on. And then we were getting this excuse making for why it wasn't happening along if you don't have enough people. And so we wrote up the audit, we published it. And one of the things I did before it came out was I offered a copy to an organization called Disability Rights in Oregon. Because what I decided about my role as a fellow elected official was that the 5 other electeds who were responsible for running the departments of the city, it was too easy for them to ignore audit results if it was just me talking to them or my audit team's talking to them. And so I had to make kind of a to-do about it and bring the community's attention to bear, because that political pressure would force them to take it seriously and to act.
Yeah.
And so I reached out to Disability Rights in Oregon, and there was their legal advisor, took the audit, read it, and we said, we'll give you a copy and invite you to reply to the audit findings and offer anything else. And if you don't think the audit is good, you're welcome to say that as well. We wanted to put ourselves in the same hot seat.
Wow.
And so he writes back this, within 24 hours, he turned around this very lengthy letter, single space, and he brings even more important context and facts to the table.
Wow.
And one of them was what in the first year of COVID, they estimated that 1 in 3 people who died of COVID in Oregon were people with disabilities.
Ugh.
And so that makes it very hard
Yeah.
for the city and the other elected officials to know those findings. And so I was very appreciative of that organization. And we also went on we have a talk show here on our public radio station called Think Out Loud. And he came on Think Out Loud with me, and then he could talk from his level of subject matter expertise. And I could talk about the management issues that we found.
Right.
And on that show, the interim manager of emergency management said again, well, we just don't have the people to do it. And then the host of the show came to me and said, well, Auditor, what do you have to say about that? And I said, I am sorry, you don't get to opt out of complying with a federal law
Yeah.
because you don't have enough people. Like that is, you have to be raising those issues.
The ultimate criteria.
Absolutely. And so I was a little surprised they kept persisting in that as the reason or the excuse why they hadn't gotten done what they knew would get done.
Well, the two classic reasons of all oddities, are out of money, out of time.
Yes.
We're all out of money, out of time. All of us are
Right.
out of money, out of time. That's just a human condition thing.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think that one of the things, and this is, I think, an example of why auditing around issues of equity can daylight so many important things, because they could have been very effective at other things, but because our scope was specifically around how are you taking care of the most vulnerable people in our community, which federal law says you're supposed to, how are you prioritizing that? And they weren't. Well, this absolutely weren't doing that. And so it changed the conversation. And we had about 10 recommendations in the audit. And after that came out in 2021, my term ended in 2022. So subsequent to my departure, a new emergency management director came in. They had some turnover, and he was very interested in the findings of the audit. He and I sat down, so I was able to walk through all the findings with him on the recommendations. And he had a different skill set than the prior manager. And so he was on it, understood what was supposed to be happening, and really started making moves pretty immediately to start working on the recommendations. And so it was a really kind of rewarding and fulfilling
Good job.
outcome to have this new person coming along going so open to the findings instead of that defensive.
Did you benchmark against other cities like following this policy? Because I'm imagining like a city like Houston, right? Who is not going to fall off into the, abyss, but they're going to experience a hurricane. And I remember the, people in Florida nursing homes during a hurricane died in the nursing home, had no electricity, because that listing of where they were wasn't even there. So how would a city the size of Houston track where the disabled people are? How do they get the data?
Yeah, the Disability Rights Oregon folks suggested that the city should be doing a self-assessment with all of its partners in this area. And one of the things they should do is say, we have this issue. And who wants to tell the government where they are and what their needs are? Like, nobody wants to do that anymore.
No, you don't want to be tracked by the government. No.
Right. And so it's all voluntary.
Yeah.
Yes. So they say do a self-assessment and sit down with knowledgeable people, like sit down with Disability Rights Oregon, and let's figure this out, like how we can do it. Or could you have an intermediary who does the outreach and keeps the records and does all this stuff if they don't want to move to the government? And so they had a lot of insight, a lot of good ideas. But in terms of comparable to other cities, the Department of Justice has filed lots of lawsuits and entered into settlement agreements. I think Los Angeles, New York, there's lots of cities who are not in compliance. And at the end of the audit, because we were concerned that the city was not in compliance with the Americans with Disabilities Act, we sent a letter to our U.S. Attorney's Office and said,
Mm-hmm.
here are the findings of our audit. We're not making any judgment one way or the other. If there's been any violations, that's your job. We don't come to expertise. And unfortunately, I never heard another word about it. So I don't know. They also are so smart, but
Yeah. Wow.
there's a real risk there that the Department of Justice will come in, as it did with our police department.
It's a huge risk. Yeah.
Then the city is really on the hook for lots of millions of millions of dollars to get right with that. So it was high risk, very high risk to the people who need those services. And so it was just, I'm glad it was, maybe we would have gotten to it at some point on our audit schedule, but because of COVID,
Mm-hmm.
prioritized that and took other things off and leave space for that.
Oh, that is beautiful. You've probably saved a lot of lives with that.
Well, I hope so. I hope so. And I hope that it really galvanized the city
Yeah.
to prioritize better. And because, like you say, nobody has all the resources they need. Nobody has all the people they need. And the only way around that is you've got to prioritize. And so you should be prioritizing people who need it most. And we know that that's not what city governments often do. They often prioritize the loudest groups,
The wealthiest.
wealthiest groups, those donors.
Right.
And so this is an area where it really daylighted something that was needing the attention of city parents now. I mean, needed their resources.
Yeah.
And so hopefully we're working on that to this day.
Gosh, I just love your activist stance, like how you took it, not activist, but you didn't just do your audit and then say, good luck with that, buds.
Yeah.
What a lot of auditors do because of their position, but you're an elected official in Portland, or you were an elected official, and you really took to heart your responsibility to protect the public. Like, what would you say your mantra was as you were thinking about what to do next?
And now, a word from our sponsor. Today's episode is brought to you by Yellowbook-CPE, the heroes behind the jumbo bundle of self-study courses. With a 1-year subscription, you get access to over 170 hours of top-notch CPE content. Dive into thrilling tales of agile, IT auditing, fraud, and internal controls. All courses carry NASBA's quality seal, so you know they've got the superpower of trustworthiness. Just click the link in the description to sign up. And now, back to our story.
Do you have like a philosophy about what your role is as a city auditor?
I do.
Okay, good.
Pretty quickly after I started,
Mm-hmm.
I realized if I am behind closed doors having a conversation or I'm trying to get somebody to do better, it is so easy for them to ignore me, to pat me on the head, nod, say thank you so much for bringing that to our attention.
Right.
And I thought, this is a loser's game. Like, this is not anything I can keep doing because I'm not getting my job done.
Right.
And so that's when we really started seriously doing outreach into the community. We started meeting with advocacy groups and community groups and really trying our engagement. And part of that is because early in my career, I was a newspaper reporter. And you spend all of your time out in the community or a newspaper reporter.
Right.
And so that was my instinct was, let's go out and find out what's going on because the people we're serving are not in this building. They're not in City Hall. They're out in the neighborhoods.
Beautiful.
And so we moved out and started doing more things in the neighborhoods and inviting people to come testify at council after we do present an audit. You let people know when we're going to council and then we come in. And it just really elevated our recommendations. It elevated the significance of what we were trying to get people to do. And so that became just the way we do things. It's just part of and before every audit, I would ask the audit team for a communication plan. Like, who do we anticipate we're going to need to reach out to at some point? Who should we expect would be interested in our findings? And it always involved different stakeholder groups. And then when the time came, we weren't scratching our heads at the end when we're tired. And, you just want your next assignment because you're bored with whatever you've been doing. So that work was done at the front end of the audit.
Good, Mary. That's so beautiful. What a deep public service you've offered. You were independent. I know you had a problem with your independence there for a little bit, which we talked about in another chat. But you fought hard to have that independence that you needed so you could tell the truth and go beyond just presenting your audit results, but actually working with the community to get action taken to protect the disabled. That's beautiful, Mary. Thank you. Thank you for doing that. You have saved lives, especially if you guys fall off into the ocean, you know.
If our town turns into quicksand, I don't know that we won't save any lives, but if
Yeah.
we have a tornado or something,
Yeah, if you have
hopefully.
something smaller, yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
Okay. So you went to the client. They were not reacting. They're like, sorry, we don't have enough money. We don't have time. We can't do it. Your approach was to go out to the community. When you did that, what kind of reaction did you get from the auditee? Were they outraged? Were they what did how'd they react to that?
So the management level auditees, now my fellow elected official auditees, they had hurt feelings because
Right.
I think when people are in emergency management, they're getting up every day thinking we're going to protect people, we're going to keep our communities safe. And so we came in and said, hey, you have a blind spot,
Yeah.
around people with disabilities, the people who need you most. And so there was, I think, some shock that we were critical of what they had been doing, and basically pointing out areas where they needed to get busy. And I had conversations with some of the management team of that department, and they had their feelings hurt. They really did. And I didn't feel like I was making myself understood that I'm sorry your feelings are hurt, but ultimately I really don't care. And I'm sure that your feelings are hurt.
Yeah, because you have to see beyond the auditee and see the disabled person that's depending on you and your work.
Right. And so we listen, we try to explain what our role is, what our purpose is. And
Yeah.
sometimes people get really upset that we publish our results. And so I tell them we have to. We follow the Yellowbook.
Right.
It's a requirement of our professional standards, and that seems to go some way into assuaging that we're out to get them. But there was a little consternation, and they're embarrassed.
Right.
They're this is their job, and they're
Right.
embarrassed that the findings were so stark.
Right.
And then when the Disability Rights Oregon people came in, they are bringing the facts of what life on the ground is like in Oregon for people with disabilities. And that stat about 1 in 3 people who died in the early days of COVID were people with disabilities. I mean, at some point, you can't be in denial, you can't have hurt feelings. And it kind of ended the conversation about whether you were going to keep negotiating back and forth, whether we were going to comply with a federal law. And so for my purposes, it really helped me a lot to have that group. And they're so knowledgeable.
Yeah.
And they're in it every day. We're not in it every day. They're in it every day with their subject matter experts. And I just thought that the letter was powerful, and they published that along with our audit and the management response. We also published the Disability Rights Oregon letter so other people could read it. And then we went on the talk show and talked about the audit.
What about you said the elected officials had a different response. So the managers of the program were hurt because it was critical of what they had accomplished or not accomplished. What about the elected officials? How did they take it?
So at the time that this audit came out, the mayor had responsibility for emergency management. So that was part of his administrative oversight duties. The mayor. And so the responses came from 2 different departments. One was the Office of Equity and Human Rights, which I symbol and responding to accommodation requests.
Yeah.
And then emergency management. And his name is on the management responses. Whether he reads them before they were submitted to us, I don't know. The one for emergency management was very defensive and made a lot of excuses. And you could read the hurt feelings coming out of it. And his name is on the memo, along with the department head. And then the one that came out of the Office of Equity and Human Rights was much more acknowledging, yes, this is correct. Yes, we're not doing a good job. Yes, we're not coordinating. We're falling short, but you don't have enough people. And so that one was a little bit different, where they're acknowledging they have responsibility. And so it was funny to have his name on both of these letters. But he didn't have much to say in particular, because he is a man who is driven by evidence and who's driven by facts.
Well, that's good.
And he can read an audit report or any other kind of report that came out of my office and size up what we're trying to say.
Mm-hmm.
Very bright guy. And so I don't think that he felt like he was in a position to push back or do anything publicly other than those written responses. And I just, what's funny, I should have asked him if he saw those responses that were written in his name. But
Mary, does it ever feel like to you, like it feels like the responsibility to the public just kind of goes on and on and on? Like, did these guys even think about this issue before you brought it up? I mean, they're doing their bit. They're, following their predecessors, running these different programs, thinking they're doing great, trying to make those programs as good as they can. Were they even aware of this issue at all before you brought it to their attention?
I would say no.
Yeah.
That they thought they had the base covered because they go out and do general kinds of things, or they'd have general plans. But they were just devoid of any specific conversation about people with disabilities. And so I think they were caught off guard by the findings, ultimately. And of course, they're really not caught off guard because you're talking to them all the time. Like,
Yeah.
a lot of you is going back and they say, hey, what about this? And what about this? And what about this? But I think when they read the black and white sentences in the report, I think that's why we got that big response of, wait a minute, you can't say that. If you have evidence to the contrary, if we missed something, we're happy to review it. But they just kept coming back saying, well, we don't have enough people.
Ooh, wow. So they had their armor, they had their little world, and you just zeroed right in on one of their major vulnerabilities.
I think the context of COVID, where everybody was so freaked out, like everybody was just overall,
Right.
was alone, and the people who had to go into their offices or go into work were just scared to death. It was just a terrible time, and so it kind of presented this perfect moment to do this audit.
Because they're vulnerable, they're more open. Is that what you mean by that?
Well, what I mean is that it was we all are talking about these crazy earthquakes that are supposed to happen. And it's so bizarre, it's so abstract that we can't even quite appreciate how bad it's supposed to be. I find it defeating to talk about the worst possible earthquake that could possibly happen instead of a 5.0 on the Richter scale, which would, possibly damage your house and stuff.
Right.
But we could go into this without having that kind of destruction. And so we've essentially set the city up to get ready for when the time comes that there will be destruction, there will be some sort of wildfire or earthquake or something.
Or another pandemic.
And they will know where people with disabilities are, they will know where Audients are, they will know. As I don't need that kind of help, but who knows? When I'm older, maybe I will need that kind of help.
Yeah.
And so they should be set up to do better.
Great job, Mary. Great story. Thank you. That is so impactful. And I love how you kind of broke through the normal auditor veil between the entity and the public.
Yeah.
I love that.
It's really the only way to use the power of an elected auditor is I've got to get the public involved.
Thank you, Mary. That was beautiful.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you, brave listeners, for joining us on this adventure. We appreciate your loyalty. Take a moment to subscribe and share this podcast with all your audit allies. And don't miss out on Yellowbook-CPE's upcoming webinars. Because every superhero needs their training. And Yellowbook-CPE offers continuing education that's relevant, convenient, and as thrilling as the fight for justice. Until next time, audit on!